Welcome to something quite novel for us, the School Sport Conference online. I'm Roger Wood from Sport New Zealand, and I'm joined by Mike Summerall from School Sport New Zealand and Brian Dickinson from College Sport Wellington. And we're very pleased that you could join us, and we're pleased that we could put this together in a way that does work in the current environment. There's a lot of turnover in the sports coordinator world every year, and we find that these workshops around your role and just giving you an opportunity to ask questions are really useful and important, even though this is a weird year to be a new sports coordinator if you are. So what we really want to do with this workshop, it's the first time we've tried it online, and normally it would be pretty interactive. So we do have an intention to do the same kind of thing today. We have got 50 minutes because we are running end-on-end workshops, and thanks to Mike for all the work that he's done putting this together. We've also got Gary Carnahan from School Sport New Zealand and a number of regional sports directors that some of you might know as well, so welcome to you all. I guess the first thing is the reason that we run these workshops and the conferences is because of the value that we place in the Sports Coordinator Network. It's a network that doesn't exist in primary schools. There's somewhere over 500 of you around the country, and school sport wouldn't happen in New Zealand. Secondary school sport wouldn't happen in New Zealand without your commitment and passion and work. But there's a lot of support for you, and so you've got three organisations that are going to have a chat to you about really briefly about what our roles are and how we might be able to support you. But the first thing we really want you to do is we're going to break you up into some rooms. For anyone that's been involved in Zoom, you might have been involved in some breakout rooms, but we want to hear from you about what you want to get out of today, because we can make this, we are the experts in everything. We can answer all of the questions that you might come up with. But we're going to break you up into groups for 5 minutes, and we want you to just come up with 3 key questions that you really want us to cover during the course of the next 45 odd minutes. And so Mike's going to hit a button. You'll appear in a breakout room with some colleagues. A good way for you to meet people from around the country as well. One of the positives about this way of operating is that we can get our South Island sports coordinators involved in the North Island Conference as well, which is really cool. So Mike, do you want to split everyone into breakout rooms? You've got 5 minutes. We're keen for you to come up with 3 questions. But if you've got other questions, then bring them back, and we want you to put them into the chat so that we can then assemble them and just make sure that we cover them off when you come back. So we'll see you in 5 minutes. You did have a chance to chat to someone in your room. What you could do is if you could put your questions into the chat function, and Mike and Brian are just going to monitor that and then try and group them, make sure that we cover them off during the course of the next 35 minutes. Is that 40 minutes, Rod? So yeah, hopefully you had an opportunity to introduce yourselves to some new people. I thought what we might do now is I'll give you a quick idea of what Sport New Zealand does. So probably of the 3 organisations that are here, less relevant in some ways, directly relevant to your roles, but I think you will hear a bit about Sport New Zealand over the course of, especially if you're looking at the media at the moment. There's a hell of a lot in the media about it. But I will just attempt to share a screen and give you a bit of a heads up on what my role is and what Sport New Zealand's role is. Can people see that? You should be able to see that. Cool, thank you. So the first thing, and for those of you that haven't been around for very long, you might not remember back to the early 2000s, the old Hillary and the New Zealand Sports Foundation joined, and they became Spark originally, and then Sport New Zealand, established in 2002. The minister is Grant Robertson, which is a good thing. If you're any government agency and your minister is the Minister of Finance, and that's normally a positive thing. And we are 2 organisations. So even though it's called Sport New Zealand, We've got the Sport New Zealand that I work for, and that tends to work in the school area, and we have High Performance Sport New Zealand. And again, two separate organisations but joined under one group. Three key roles: lead, enable, invest, and I'll talk a bit more about that shortly. So from a leadership perspective, a significant research role. We've got a whole research and what they call intelligence, what other people call different names, but intelligence and insights team. Active New Zealand comes out every year, which is the participation pattern. We have an integrity unit, build integrity frameworks. You might have heard about physical literacy. So our leadership role is really around not just research, but it's actually leading thinking as well. Balance is better is our philosophy around quality experiences for rangatahi in particular in sport. And we have a sport development team that has developed that and looks after that. And we have a strategic plan that goes through to 2032 called Everybody Active. At the moment, our strategic direction is in the age group that you are working in. So it's secondary and primary age kids. We have an enable function. So for those of you that are new sports coordinators, and even if you're not, we develop resources. One of them is called Running Secondary School Sport. It's available on our website. We have got a new website that hopefully is easier to navigate. These things were buried for quite a long time and no one knew how to find them. There's a planning tool. There's a funding database. All schools are keen on finding funding. And on our website, there is a thing called the funding database where you can put in where you are, what you need the money for, and it will then throw out, not the money, but it'll throw out a list of organisations that you might be able to apply for. We have resources around governance. We have a focus at the moment on girls and young women, and we have a number of projects in that space. And you will see some publicity, a lot of publicity around the Summit, Women and Girls Summit coming up. And we are hosting an international Women and Girls in Sport Summit as well in a couple of years. Part of that enabling function is supporting this conference, Sport New Zealand, and another area is the Voice of Rangatahi. So some of your schools might have been involved in this research project, and that gives us some qualitative information about what kids are saying about the quality of their sport experience, which is fascinating. If you're interested in that, talk to your regional sports director. And then we've got an investment function as well. So we are the government agency that invests in sport and recreation. We directly fund the Regional Sports Director Network and RSTs and National Sports and Rec organisations. We fund projects like Good Sports that some of you might have come across around parent education. School Sport New Zealand is one of our investment partners. And the Healthy Active Learning and Play.Sport initiatives are primary school initiatives around enhancing the quality of physical education. And then recently, 3 weeks ago, Tū Manawa Active Aotearoa is a new fund that launched on the 24th of August. And you should all know about that. If you don't know about it yet, then check your Regional Sports Trust website. The RSTs are administering this on our behalf. It's a $16 million fund over the course of the next year. And it is about quality play, active recreation and sport opportunities for young people, particularly those that are missing out. So happy to answer some questions. You might have some questions around that later on. And the three things I guess we do are we support quality support for young people, access to quality opportunities, and that if we can put the quality support and opportunities in place, then we believe that young people will have quality experiences which will create a life in sport and rec. So the quality support are you people, essentially. Quality opportunities are the things you do in your secondary schools. So from a relevance in terms of your role, we develop resources that you should access. If you can't find them, then let us know and we'll direct you to them. Insights into rangatahi, particularly around those significant pieces of research. And funding, we fund directly into the RSD network, but we also then make funding channels available, PD opportunities and advocacy with principals and education leaders. So those are probably, we probably won't, if people have got questions, then put them into the chat as well.
Sure.
Happy to answer them from that. But that's probably enough from Sport New Zealand. It might, that's my contact details as well. So if people do want to make contact or have questions, then feel free to fire some questions through. I might stop sharing, and presumably you guys have had a look at the questions that we might have from the breakout session. Might just hand over to Brian Dickinson from College Sport Wellington. He's a regional sports director, one of 20 around the country. Each of your schools sits under a regional sports director region, and they're a significant resource that can help you with your roles. So, and I'll come back to any questions through the chat if you've got any, and we'll talk about them later on. Brian.
Hi, Roger. Thanks for that. Mike, I just want to share my screen, but it's saying host disabled participant screen sharing.
You should be good to go, mate. It says you're a co-host.
Okay, cool. Thank you. Awesome. Right, can people see that? Thumbs up, nods. Okay, hi all. Just to introduce myself, I'm the Executive Director for College Sport Wellington. So we cover obviously the lower north half of the North Island. So we go up to Otaki and Kapiti, don't cover the Wairarapa, but the Upper Hutt region. So look, I mean, in a sense, the regional sports directors roles have been around for a fair while. It's a contract that Sport NZ engages with organisations around the country. It'd be fair to say that the regional sports director, the role, it's different in each region with slight variations, and it's really a horses for courses and whatever the local region needs. Broadly speaking, I guess you could say they fall into two categories. One would be the regional sports director is employed through your local regional sports trust. So that may be Sport Hawke's Bay or Sport Canterbury, whatever it is. So there's that kind of regional sports trust position, and they sit within that organisation. The other ones, like College Sport Wellington, some of the larger metropolitan areas, it sits within a college sport organisation, and those college sport organisations are essentially established to manage the secondary school competitions for that area, the more sort of hands-on business as usual type stuff, but it makes sense in those areas for the regional sports director to work within that. So in the case of Sport Wellington, that's me. So I essentially wear two hats, all under the one title of executive director. Working, delivering on the contracted parts with Sport NZ for the regional sports director role, but also overseeing our competition management for all the various sports we look after. So in terms of that RSD role, again, it's a contract with Sport NZ, and essentially it's a lot of it's the off-field stuff, and it's around capability. So there's four key objectives in the current plan, and the first one is obviously to advocate strongly for the value of sport and for all rangatahi in schools. Establish a clear understanding of the current status of secondary school sport in your region and the infrastructure that supports it. Developing ideal state models, and that's a lot of best practice type stuff. And I guess in a way that's what we're here today to talk about a little bit and help you on that way in terms of finding out what else is out there and developing some great models within your schools. And then lastly, it really is just to help you implement that plan. So that could cover a range of different things, can be strategic plans, it could be a facility work, it could be around gaming funding or trust funding, all the way through to some of the new initiatives I'll talk about in a wee bit that Sport NZ and the regional sports trusts are launching at the moment. In our case, and a few of the other regions, we're also managing the secondary school competitions. The stuff that's happening on a weekday, on a weekend. We find there's some great advantages in that because we're having those day-to-day chats with schools around business as usual stuff, then we can weave in the more touchy-feely off-field strategic stuff. Okay. So support available, I've broken it down to a few different areas here. So obviously there's that advocacy. We'll go into bat for you with your principals and your board of trustees if there's a particular issue. Similarly with the regional sports or the national bodies, if it's particular issues, councils and funding partners. So again, we want to be that port of call, your support person. If you're finding issues that you need addressing, call us in and we can help, at least providing moral support, if not a bit more hands-on support around that. Sport development, so again, it's around that strategic planning. It could be the sponsorship, trust funding. I have to admit, there's no silver bullets out there. There's no, we can't just go in and solve your problems straight away, or may not be able to, but call on us. We've got a whole lot of resources. One of the things we find actually, especially within Wellington, we've got 40 schools in Wellington, that instead of reinventing the wheel, first thing that people should do is just put their hand up and ask the others. So we end up being sort of a conduit. If someone needs a particular plan or document or whatever it is, generally speaking, another school has probably already developed it, and we're able to just network the different schools and share those resources to the point that we've actually established a bit of a buddy system and see the schools up where we know that someone's coming into it fresh. We'll find a more established coordinator or another school just to help them through things. Professional development, so that may be again an induction right at the start of the year, or could be more sort of workshops or things exactly like this, conferences. There's always opportunities that we want to give to you guys, so again, we're there to assist however we can. Promotion recognition, obviously it's probably easier for a college sport organisation that we've got the followings through Facebook and Instagram and all that sort of stuff for our competitions. We can sort of provide that high level promotion of activities, and it's a way for you guys to share with us and us to get the word out, and we pull it all together towards the end of the year with an awards evening. COVID running obviously. So again, the event stuff, that it's to varying degrees around the regions, or around the country rather. Some are more hands-on. Some of the regional sports directors may look after us a handful of events, and it's more around a relationship with the regional sports organisation, hands-on delivering the competition. And then administrative, and that's just all of the stuff in the background, whether it be census time, which will be coming up very shortly. Mike will put the call out, and where the middlemen, so we'll help you prepare all of that census information that goes into the national database, and again we'll make, in terms of student eligibility for nationals, tournaments and all that sort of stuff, we're the ones that just panel beat it, make sure it looks right and it aligns with the national rules before your students head off for national tournaments. Future challenges. Oh look, these have probably always been there, or been there for a fair while now, and they just evolve gradually over time. One of the observations we have is just around school sport in particular, and how does it actually differ from club sport, and why kids play school sport, and that's something that we all need to be enforced around the values. In Wellington in particular, we're doing a bit of work on that. Club v school, I mean that's been around for years and years, and it always will be there. I think it's fair to say, acknowledge that there's no perfect flowchart for these things. A student will find their way through their sporting experience in their own way, and we just have to have systems that don't create too many roadblocks for them. Social media, obviously that's been a bit of a topic of interest in the last wee while. Social media, it's neither a good or a bad thing. It's just there, and it's how we deal with it, and sort of minimise the negative impacts and focus on the positives. Evolving sporting interest tastes. So look, over the last 5-6 6 years, even a little bit longer. We've seen basketball go on the rise and rise. Futsal in particular in Wellington, and as a Wellington example, and Auckland and Canterbury, I think. And then that leads on to the question around, where do we leave the boundaries? There's that debate around whether esports, where it fits in, computer gaming. And then good old sideline behaviour, which has been of interest lately, obviously with COVID restrictions and minimising crowds, and it's been interesting getting the feedback from the students around that. But again, that's if you stay hopeful and we move beyond COVID, that issue will be there, and we've just got to keep on top of it. And again, so you come back to our support for you guys. That's where we can come over the top with region-wide messaging and programs and projects to really reinforce good silent behaviour. And obviously, last but not least, obviously, is COVID-19 and starting to operate in a new normal. And there's no definitive insight in date for this. So at what point do we start evolving the programs that this is just new normal, how we're dealing with things? But it's not all doom and gloom, because Roger mentioned some of them before, but there are all these opportunities. One of the observations that I'd make is both at a national level with Sport NZ and your regional sports trusts, they're all going through a bit of a strategic realignment around their focus areas. So while organised competitive sport will always play a part, will always be there and it's a focus, it'd be fair to say that both at national and regional level, scopes are being broadened, and it's taking in more of that active recreation and play. And so that does create opportunities. I think my observation is that a lot of schools are in this space already, but it just hasn't necessarily been recognised through funding or by national bodies. But now it is. And then off that is things like Te Manawa Active Aotearoa Fund and the Healthy Active Learning Program. So there's resource and funding now available for these types of activities that your school may well have already been involved with, and that's probably a good chance for you to have a conversation with your HODs of FZ or principals or whoever's looking after those programs. And obviously balance is better. And again, I think schools have always largely been in this space. I know there'll be the catch cry around the first 15s and whatnot, but I don't want that overstated, because I do believe that school sport is well placed to maintain that balance, probably better than club structures. So it's a good recognition of the work that schools are already doing, and it's something I'm sure you'd all support anyway. And so that's about it for me. So if I go back to wherever we are, there we are. Mike, how are we going for questions?
There's lots of them. Hopefully what I'll do is try and incorporate those questions into my spiel so that we can start getting through them. But I think some of them are part of my thing, so we should be okay. Right, you guys can see that?
Yep.
Right on. Okay, I am Mike Summerall. I'm the event manager for School Sport New Zealand. Hopefully some of you guys would have come across myself, or more importantly, Lise, through your dealings with us on that National Secondary School Sport calendar. School Sport New Zealand are an organisation that has been set up by principals to act on their behalf to ensure that there are quality school sport experiences for all students. Primarily what that looks like is a huge calendar with 240 events trying to fit into a school curriculum year, and we do our best to try and make sure that sports are meeting the needs of schools and the students within them, and vice versa. So we really try and be that middle ground to ensure that there are opportunities for everyone to be involved in sport at a school level. And that is very much around the philosophy that whatever your sport is, you hopefully will have the opportunity to get up on stage and have a pat on the back from a principal to say, well done for participating in something. And that's certainly reflected in the 240 odd events on the calendar. I apologise for the bright pink this year. That was Lisa's opportunity. She's been trying for about 10 years to get that colour on, and she finally got her way. What the school sport calendar does is provides an opportunity to get everything in a calendar year that fits schools' needs, and allows for schools to plan with certainty around certain aspects of that event that they'll be looked after. So things like health and safety, eligibility of students, what the expectations of behaviours look like while you're at those events. Many of the events incorporate a high performance element. They are highly competitive, and they're the types of events like Māori Cup, Top 4 rugby, Lotto Premiership football. If you've been to those events, I don't think there's too much you can say that around the quality of experience for those kids participating in that style of event. They're hugely relevant for a portion of our students, and that's right across the board for a lot of the events that we sanction. But I guess what we are seeing is that year on year, and Brian quite happily mentioned census, that's coming up, and I'll get into that shortly, but our census is a longitudinal study that allows us to track sport participation within schools. And what that's showing us is, regardless of how often we might add events into the calendar or how often we might change what that offering looks like, the percentage of students across the country is basically staying static. That is a good thing, where we're seeing lots of people dropping out of sport and having different ways of other opportunities that they can be involved in. The fact that we are maintaining that percentage of participation should be seen as a positive. But also we're hearing that people want to participate in different ways. And that's led us to really think about what could we do at our level to try and create a system that's going to allow that, and for schools to value that type of participation, because it's a lot easier for schools to have a focus around a team's event that they can plan for, etc. It's a bit harder to try and think about where that different type of offering might fit in to the wider school culture. So there's a bit of work to do around that space. But what's that is leading to is these types of scenarios. So census will be happening in term 4. Given you are all new sport coordinators, I'm hoping that you will at least have heard of this type of thing from your RSDs. It's a really important piece of work for us, and especially in the year that we've just been through and are still trying to navigate through, to really see the impact, I guess, that COVID-19 has had on the national sports calendar. I can say that this year, while we've probably seen, since the lockdown came in, we've probably seen about 70% of our events cancelled. We have probably never worked harder to try and pull all these types of different pieces of information together and trying to get these opportunities to students. It was amazing to see Winter Tournament Week shift to a more regional model. And I think there's a hell of a lot of learnings there for everyone around what that may lead to going forward. And it's something we're really keen to have discussions with around how that can be incorporated into future thinking. But moreover, what we have looked at is a different way of schools to view the events on the national sports calendar. And for 2021, we've been working with sports over the last 3 or 4 months to really have some strong conversations around offerings. And we want those sports to start thinking about where their offering fits in a tiered model for schools. So we came up with 3 tiers. They're increasingly formal and competitive from carnivals up to championships. Championships, as I said, are your Ranking Cup, your Māori Cup, your high competitive sports with all of the eligibility attached to them, etc., etc. But as we know, while the eligibility creates a level playing field, it can also act as a bit of a deterrent for many schools to actually enter some of these events. So what we had discussions with sports about and schools was the introduction of cup formats, whereby the events that are seen as cup are still competitive sport experiences. You're there to go away and play sport and compete at your highest possible way of doing that. But there's also an opportunity to play with the eligibility rules to an extent where composite teams can be formed, homeschooled students can participate, and they can actually go away and be part of an experience where they can win the event, as long as everyone is aware of that and everyone is competing by the same rules. Then under that, we've got this whole new space that is to be developed. It's more future thinking than it is set in stone for 2021, but it's a way of saying, there are lots of different ways of playing sport now, and it's a way of trying to pull through a lot of the positive parts of a whole school sport experience, which means traveling away with your friends, staying in overnight accommodation, and everything that comes with that style of participation. We're asking sports to not really focus on the competitive element. We're not looking for the winner at the end of the day necessarily, but we're looking for ways to pull out all of the good things that being involved in sport can bring. So that's a work in progress, but I can say that the sports that we deal with, and there's over 70 NSOs and a pile of private event providers, are really starting to get behind this, and it's very much embedded in the works Sport New Zealand are doing around the Balance is Better philosophies. So we believe our role can be around the system. We can start trying to help with those sports to try and pull in offerings that suit a broader participation range. So that's basically my spiel, trying to get through a huge piece of work that we do. And there's a pile of questions in the chat room that I'm hoping my co-hosts have managed to have a quick look at. But based on the presentations you've heard, is there any, and you're all muted, so I tried to set that up at the beginning, so if you've got a question, feel free to unmute yourself and throw one out there. But if we don't hear anything in the next 10 seconds, I'll just pick one at random and we'll start trying to roll through them. But is there, given we've only got about 10, 15 minutes left, is there a particular question someone would like answered for us to have a conversation about?
There's a couple of questions, Mike, about the terms and conditions of sports coordinators. I think a few of you probably are wondering about that. And Brian, you might like to talk about that.
Brian, are you still there, mate? Have you dropped off?
No, he's gone for now. I'm sure he'll be back. What about Gary? You probably have a bit of a understanding about how this works too?
Gary's gone, Rog.
That's okay. So many of you are employed under support staff in schools, so you're subject to an award. A high proportion of sports coordinators in the country are part-time. By desire, I would, in some cases, some of it, for some of you, it suits your lifestyle. Some of it's because of the requirements of the school. But Brian, do you want to, you're back, I see. So do you want to just talk about sports coordinators? And there's no right or wrong amount of pay. It'll never be enough. You're totally overworked and underpaid. We know that. Brian, you want to just have a chat about what you know about these issues?
Thanks, Roger. Sorry, apologies about that. Murphy's Law went down just at the wrong moment. Yeah, I can probably guess what Roger said, but yeah, you're right. I mean, it's always going to be more pay is always a good thing. And we'll always advocate for better pay conditions. My observation but there's probably some general opinion. I think Wellington's fairly representative. We've got two groups of sports coordinators. We've got a group that are salaried and on full time, and the pay is not amazing, but it's solid. They're fairly stable in their positions. They've been around for a while. They've got good school support. and you can see that reflected in the school program itself. It's very stable and it's growing, and they're starting to branch out. We've got another group that are largely term time only, paid on an hourly rate. There's not a hell of a lot of sport within the school, and they do turn over every 2 or 3 years. So that's always is our concern and our main focus is, as much as possible, just again using that best practice stuff to demonstrate why schools should invest more in their sports coordinators and get them into those salaried full-time positions. I think there was a question around qualifications, just going back to that chat. And look, there's no right or wrong answer. Like, obviously some people will go through Massey or Otago phys ed school, that kind of route. Some may do a TEC course, but to be brutally honest, a lot of the role comes down to personalities and being able to multitask and deal with things and not getting, dealing with problem parents and all of those kind of things. I don't think there is any right or wrong answer in terms of qualifications, but certainly a lot of it is more about the person themselves. And so when we're looking at professional development work, a lot of it is around that and, leadership skills and bits and pieces. I think there was a question around student to sports coordinator ratios. Again, there's no perfect science for this. In every school, you've got to be really careful comparing school to school, because there's a whole lots of different circumstances and how they approach these things. In Wellington, we've kind of got this really broad, high level, strategic aim. We'd like to see a ratio of 500 to 1, but don't take that with a grain of salt. And a lot of that is just me looking at our schools and the programs that are well established, and trying to bring some of the schools that are weaker on that up to that level. But again, I'm conscious around the country. There are probably a lot of schools in Auckland that might have a better ratio on that. Some areas in the country that may not. I think Roger was mentioning, just as I came back online, just around your contracts. Obviously, most of you will be under the support staff contracts, probably level C, maybe a few level Bs, maybe. So that's the framework, and it's all very well stepped out. I assume most of you are now aware of the pay equity negotiations that are just commencing for support staff. So that's on the back of the teacher aides having their pay equity settled. So this is where NZEI, the union, will work with the ministry, and other unions will work with the ministry and work through the process. Now, I believe the teacher aid ones, the settlement did take 2 or 3 years to reach an agreement, but my sort of second-hand understanding is that now that it's a pretty well-established process and it's all the same arguments, it hopefully won't take quite as long as that. But I think that'll be a significant change for sports coordinators when that comes in. Looking at the teacher aid scale, you're talking, looks like it's $5 to $6 easily per hour improvement, and that really, obviously, it really does add up over the course of a year. So that's something that I know Gary and School Sport NZ will be talking to the unions a lot about. And any support we can provide around that is obviously useful. Were there any other questions, Mike or Roger, around this area?
Yeah, I posted in the chat there our link to the sports coordinator survey that's done every 2 years, which is a snapshot of everything that you guys do across the country. And it tells us some pretty interesting things. Turnover is absolutely huge. It's a mostly female dominated environment, but in terms of the conversation that we're having around pay and equity and those types of things, the appraisal part of the job is something that every sports coordinator really needs to take control of. If you are wanting an opportunity to talk about the conditions in your role and how you see those types of things playing out, you need to be really proactive to approach the appropriate person in your school to have those conversations. So We will have appraisal forms that you could use. I'm sure regional sports directors' offices will have appraisal processes that you can start thinking about. But what you need to do is start thinking of the value of sport to education. How is it your role is adding value to the purpose of the school? And in that, you can show directly where sport fits and the role that you're playing within it. That conversation is a lot easier to have with principals than just going in saying, I'm overworked, I'm underpaid, give me some more time and some more money. You need to really think about how what you're going to do is going to benefit the wider school system, and you need to be able to show that really clearly. And you need to think about who the best person to approach is. Gary, you might have heard Gary uses the lovely principal's jobs are this big. Sport is about that much time in their day, and then a certain sport is the tissue paper that rubs up against the side of the wall. So you really have a very small window to try and influence people. So you really need to be thinking about who is the best person to influence to make sure that what I'm doing is going to have the most value for the school and certainly the standards and the things that you're able to do within the school. We've only got about 3 or 4 minutes left, Rog, and I can see that you might have something to say.
Well, just there are a couple of questions in there around how to increase participation, which is all of our challenges in some ways. But I just suggest a couple of things. One is be clear about what it is you're trying to increase. Don't use the census as your measure of participation of the kids in your school, because a lot of young people are actually participating in sport and active recreation, but actually not necessarily through a representative channel. Most of your work's actually involved in organising those teams. But there are a lot of people in the gym at lunchtime or out on the field at lunchtime or in the breaks. You've got to take those into account as well. So for rangatahi, there's about 90% of rangatahi are active in New Zealand. The census tells us about 51 to 54% are active through the way we measure that. But before you worry about increasing participation, have a look at what the real participation numbers are and get some additional data. That's the first thing. The second thing is that most of your work is going to be involved in organising teams, representative teams. It's an inter-school competition, and that just takes up so much time. But you don't have to do it all. So think about using young people, talk to young people about what they would like to do. 73% of rangatahi want to be more active than they currently are. And it doesn't matter whether they're currently highly active or completely inactive. It's still 3 out of every 4 want to be doing more. So you've actually got a fantastic opportunity to engage with the young people and say, well, what is it you want to do? And typically it is casual, it is lunchtimes, it is intra-school, it is things that fit into their lives, and their lives are really busy. So, so I wouldn't worry too much about trying to increase participation for participation's sake. I think you might well find that participation is really high. What you've got to do is build a evidence base, if you like, about what participation looks like in your community and in your school, and then understand and then talk to young people and figure out how they want to participate. Not all of them want to be or can afford to be or have the time to be participating in representative school sport.
Rog, do you want to give a really quick Tūmanawa plug? I'm just thinking about funding questions that have come up, and that's an opportunity that's got a pile of money in it.
Yeah, so as you know, Tūmanawa Active Aotearoa is a fund. It's administered by the Regional Sports Trust in the region. It is totally about what you do. But in the past, Kiwi Sport, the Regional Partnership Fund of Kiwi Sport that you applied to RSTs for, often would just support a salary. So Tūmanawa was not about just supporting the salary. But if you needed an extra 4 hours a week over and above your contract in order to do something for girls and young women, for disabled, for young people in higher deprivation communities, to provide an activity option for them, then you can apply for that. So Tūmanawa was about the doing, it's about the activity. It's about providing access to young people to be able to participate in sport, active recreation and play. So it's not just about sport. So active recreation is a sitter for people as well. When you talk about increasing participation, that it's not all about organised sport. People can't commit necessarily to a 16-week league, but they might well be involved in, interested in fun runs, or in being and participate or going or access to the gym. There's a whole series of different things that will fund. I suggest talk to your regional sports trust. Most of them have got what they call a fast fund, and that's got a cap of about $10,000, and that's open all the time, and you can apply to it at any point. And then most RSTs will assess those applications every month. So this is a one-year picture. In most cases, it finishes in May or June next year, but there'll be then a 3-year process. Have a look and see how the first year goes, and then refine it for the next 3 years.
Rog, can a school apply more than once, or is it just one shot?
Yep. No, it can apply more than once. So think about those target groups. Have a look at your Regional Sports Trust website, because they've got all of the criteria on it. We are interested in those kids that are less active, or those that are missing out on opportunities. And often they're missing out on opportunities for financial reasons. So this is very much targeted to kids in higher deprivation communities. Not exclusively, but certainly those are the kids that generally don't get to access sport and active recreation.
Cool. Right, guys, I think this type of conversation could go on forever. There aren't enough hours in the day to try and answer the questions that you guys have, and they're all really, really important. So I think I speak for any of the regional sports directors, certainly from School Sport New Zealand and from Sport New Zealand. The door is always open. If you would like to get in touch with us to ask us specific questions, then please do. That opportunity to continue that style of communication is really, really important. Use each other regionally, and think about how you can access good ideas from other regions, and your regional sports directors are the best place to think about that type of thing for you. It's a pretty big day. We've got a pile of other workshops all set up back to back for the rest of the day. So if you are involved in those next ones, go and grab yourself a cup of tea. We're due to start at 10 a.m. Regional sports directors have been given links to every workshop. So if you find that you have some time and you want to see another one, grab those guys, the links off them. But we are recording everything, and we'll do our best to get those up as soon as we possibly can on our website. But thanks, guys. And hopefully we'll see a few of you in the next couple of workshops.
Thanks, everyone. Good to see you.
See you all later.
Cheers.